It's very hard, almost impossible, to be world-class at one thing. It is very easy to be half-assed at 7 things. If we're gonna die, I'd rather die at least on trying to be world-class on one thing. But certainly one of my rituals is to make sure that the very problem I'm trying to remove is true and honest.
How do you determine how big enough a problem is to pursue it?
Really, no love for the technology. If anything, you should be so disconnected to the technology that you should be willing to throw away anything which you worked on all the way up to this point without changing the very pain you're trying to kind of remove.
Quick thank you to our sponsor, The Gents Place. What is The Gents Place? Imagine a country club meets speakeasy meets barbershop. If you're interested in owning and running a business that you can actually be proud of, one built with confidence, community, and consistency, this is worth a look. With top location performance exceeding $1.4 million in gross sales, they are at the cutting edge of their industry and franchising in 30-plus states across the U.S. If that lights a fire for you, go to tgpfranchising.com, complete the form, and book an intro call to learn more about owning your very own location of The Gents Place. All right, welcome back to the Untrapped Entrepreneur Show. I have Dennis Mortensen here. Dennis, thanks for joining us. You have the shortest intro ever that you've ever given us. You're very simple, succinct guy, so I appreciate that. But Dennis is a lifelong entrepreneur based in New York City and currently the founder and CEO of Launch Brightly. So there's a lot more to unpack there for sure. But thank you for the simple intros. I mean, some people give me, a whole novel, but I appreciate that. And I want to jump into the traps almost right away because you've given me one of the most succinct traps I think I've ever been given. I really appreciated that. When I read it in the interview notes, I said, "Oh my gosh, like I found myself in this position before." So you described one of your biggest traps as getting married to the technology rather than the problem. That hit home with me like right away. So to unpack that for me. Tell me a little bit more about how you arrived at that. And if it came from a personal experience, be honest.
Sure. And first, thanks so much for having me. This is going to be fun. And it's not like I'm saying anything new. It is one of those reminders, really, for where we're all fully aware, but it's still so easy once you kind of touch a new technology to fall in love. You geek out a little bit, you geek out over the weekend, and all of a sudden, oh, this is just so cool. Imagine all the things which we can do with this. Then you kind of dream up a little kind of a strain of an idea and you get cranking. That's not really you trying to make a business. That is you fooling around with some new cool technology. And there's nothing wrong with that. There should be plenty of time and room for you and me to play around with new technology. We just shouldn't use it as some sort of foundation for what we think might be a new firm. That's something else. That happens over here. And I've certainly seen myself earlier, when I was younger, more easily get married to some new technology for where there was surely a market about to arrive, but I didn't get married to any particular problem. It was not like I've spoken to these particular people in this particular vertical doing this particular process. And if I could remove that process or make it faster, cheaper, or something like that, they would be happy. Perhaps even so happy, they'll be willing to surrender a few monies and give them to me so I can put them in my pocket and do the next thing. That was certainly a entrepreneurial defect I had very early on. So I'm an engineer of trade and education, and I'm very easy to jump to keyboard, as saying, you give me, a couple of these, and then, hype out on, caffeine and sugar, I'll get cranking. Then you get a little older, and then you figure out, Dennis, your job here is really to help some users do some task and make sure they do that a little bit better than yesterday. So it's been some sort of curve where I would say 2 days out of college, I was all technology, where now at whatever inflection point I'm at, I'm all problem. As in, I have really no love for the technology. If anything, you should be so disconnected to the technology that you should be willing to throw away anything which you worked on all the way up to this point without changing the very pain you're trying to kind of remove. This just didn't work. We'll just move around, attack it from the other side, and be equally happy.
It's so hard though, because as entrepreneurs, I pride myself in creating something out of thin air, creating something out of pixie dust, and then showing everybody how cool it is that, no one else thought of it first.
And that is cool. And I certainly also have that joy. I try, though, to move away from it. I've put in place myself, and we all have different kind of rituals for how we get started on a new venture. But certainly one of my rituals is to make sure that the very problem I'm trying to remove is true and honest. And even though you tell yourself, it might even be that you're trying to get married to a problem, but it isn't a real problem. It's a problem that you imagined. So I have a whole set of steps which I do to kind of validate that what I'm about to get married to. And when you do get married, then the whole thing is all of a sudden a multi-year journey. So be very careful before you kind of get married. So I try to kind of aggressively validate that. But if I come out on the other side knowing that this is true, then I'm just unwilling to surrender. As in, the only way I surrender is once we have exactly $0 left, perhaps minus some amount, and then we might surrender. As in, Citibank should come through the door and pick up the keys. That's the last day. Because I know this is true. I might not be clever enough, fast enough, have the right kind of angle to kind of solve the problem. But if I at least know it's true and honest, well, then we can keep leaning in for as long as we are kind of possible to do so.
How do you determine how big enough a problem is to pursue it? Because as an entrepreneur, you probably can solve 10, 15, 100 different problems, over the course of this year. Is there a certain litmus test that you have there?
This is perhaps where I am slightly contrarian to your investors. So I am rarely, if ever, allergic to small or tiny or even non-existing TAMs. As in, if there's no total addressable market here, that doesn't make the problem not a problem. Just means that somehow somebody else didn't see this as a market. I can be naive, of course, as in, there's a reason this is not a market. And we can come back to how I then validate whether this is a problem worthy of pursuing, but I'm rarely worried about that. I'll give you an example from one of our prior ventures early on, which is now so obvious, but it wasn't back then that anybody doing anything on the internet would at some point attach some piece of analytics to it, as in, hey, I can't run a destination and be blind to what is happening on that destination. Even if it's just a silly blog of Dennis's or Ben's, we would still have just a little bit of insight into it. Back when we got started, there was no market for doing that. There was a few kind of solutions for extracting log files from web servers and giving you a few insights, but there's not the idea of putting a pixel on a website and get instant near real-time analytics. And at that point, I think it was a $50 million TAM per Gartner or something like that, which is just so tiny that you can't raise any capital for it, or nobody will kind of see it even as a market. However, then you blink later, say kind of multi-billion-dollar market, anybody from your mom to the most serious kind of corporation will have some analytics in place. So that's not a disqualifier, but I do like the idea, which you alluded to. Always try to come up with ideas for how I can best disqualify my idea. I think that is the cheapest way to escape this, if I can somehow kill it before I get started. I'll give you one of my little processes. So we can talk about how we end up with a long list of possible problems we can solve for. Forget about that for a second. Once you found one which you might think is a worthy pursuit, you've done all your analysis. We can talk about how we try to do that analysis as entrepreneurs. But then I invite in a handful of friends, depending on the particular type of problem. Could be a set of scientists, some engineers, some particular commercial folks, and so on and so forth. And they'll come in for a 3-4 day set of sessions. No, full days. I bring the agenda. Their only purpose is not to kind of come pat me on the back and say, fun to kind of spend 4 days with Dennis in New York. No, to kill it. As in, if I haven't prepped enough for where 4 or 5 of my smart friends who are asked to come in and shit all over it, if I can't defend that over multiple days, then it's not a worthy thing defending. I said, they came in blank and killed it. And I've had multiple kind of ideas for where I was so eager to get started on it. We can even talk about some of them. And I'm still kind of half in love with the problem, but somehow I couldn't defend it over that set of days, and then I kill it. As in,
did you prepare in that? I love that process. Did you prepare your idea, your concept, your business for battle in the best way you could? Like, did you make sure, like you went in there planning to win?
This is a multi-month endeavor where I've read all the studies, all the research, done all the interviews. I've done so much that this is supposed to be a sure thing. I said, I don't want to waste anybody's time. But if you come in and somehow there was something which I didn't see, because very quickly, once you get started on something, you want things to be true. So even as you start to interview and you try to kind of keep an open mind, you're still trying to get things to fit into your kind of new narrative of what this should look like. So, and it might even be an item that you missed for where, shit. Yeah, the unit economics that I had in mind just completely kind of disappears with that one thing for where, they'll never add up. I said, it might be a technical problem. It might even be a user problem. That might all be true, Dennis. But there's no way that this would work in a market. This is a fantasy for the future when you can produce this thing at a much lesser cost. So that's how I certainly try to come in very well prepared. Most of the time, things will survive this, but it's a very good, to kind of put it in your words, litmus test for where can it go to the next step. Then I have other steps after that before I get started as well.
I'm going to brand it. You can steal it from me or you can shit on it and hate it, but I cannot get the visual out of my mind of Gladiator. Like that, you're sending this guy into the arena, right? Your business idea just to completely get slaughtered. And if he makes his way through, it's then probably worthwhile, right?
Good luck on the other side.
That's right. I love that. X.AI. I have no idea what that is, but just the timing of it before LLMs, very interesting to me. Tell me more about that and where it is now too, like, and how that's evolved. But like, did you see all this generative stuff coming, ahead of time?
That should bring us back to the beginning, right? So as you just suggested, did you see the quality of predictions that we can make with the technology that is now available in the year 2025? Well, don't get married to that. So no, I didn't see that. Or certainly if I did, I wouldn't tell you. What I did see, though, was a particular problem that we got married to, which was tiny, but happened all the time. So the idea of scheduling meetings, we really haven't had much innovation in that space. Probably 2 major innovations, and there might be a third one coming. So the first real innovation we had in that space, which you and me are old enough to remember, was shared calendars. Everybody listening to this will not really even know how to imagine a world where I can't see when my colleague is available. But there was a moment for where any calendar was just a standalone calendar. Then came Exchange and similar technologies, and within the organization, I could at least see the availability of my colleagues. Now, you were always blind to the availability of external guests or participants in meetings, as in, I can't see Ben's calendar, and you can't see mine. The next small innovation, or real market innovation, was the kind of calendar pace from Calendly and 1,000 different kind of incarnations of that for where, all of a sudden I can book some time with you or with an SDR or with a group of people and all sorts of kind of things. And at least the external meeting became slightly easier to coordinate without too much kind of ping pong back and forth. We thought and delivered on that we could build an agent pre-LLM, pre-ChatGPT, for where you could ask in natural language before language, which is not necessarily a solved science, but certainly solved to the degree where you can now pretty much run a conversational UI. That didn't exist when we got started. But create this agent where you could ask it, hey, Amy or Andrew, could you set up a meeting between Ben, Dennis, Lainey for 20 minutes next week on Zoom, and you can make Lainey optional. The agent will then remove us from the conversation, reach out to the individual participants, have a conversation, move that forward towards the idea of a conclusion. Upon conclusion, send out an invite with the kind of details that was asked for and insert it into the calendar. Essentially trying to create a personal assistant that could do one thing, schedule meetings on your behalf. That was a very ambitious technical challenge. Side note. So whenever you do a venture, right, you're trying to do a solve for hopefully only one of two challenges. That's either a market challenge or a science and or engineering challenge. And Airbnb, that's a market challenge. As in, you and me can build that site pretty much over the weekend. They solved the kind of market challenge as saying, well, damn it. People are willing to have strangers in their apartment to earn a few extra bucks. Who would have known? And good of them to kind of figure that out. Then there's other things. The self-driving car. It's not like you read any articles in the paper of late for where people suggest, do you know what? I'm not sure I want it. We all agreed we want it. We're not sure we can make it. Now we're getting ever so close to making it. We were in the latter category as well, for where if you asked people, hey, if you could win the corporate lottery, what would you like help with? You know what? If I could get Tim, the human assistant, to come in and help kind of manage some of my time, that would be wonderful. But hey, I'm only a director of whatever at this particular organization. I'm not going to get Tim anytime soon. Well, I might be able to make Tim for you and sell him back to you for $8. You want that? That'll be fucking awesome. And then we got started on that, and it took us years and an unfair amount of capital in creating that agent, which then ended up being acquired in 2022, a couple of years ago. And then
is that technology still around?
So we essentially created two things. A lot of kind of probabilistic technology around how to make predictions in the language space, pre-LLM. And then we made this deterministic scheduling engine where it's kind of like the self-driving car, right? So you make some predictions on what you see in front of you. Now when you think you know what you see, now you need to take some actions like turn 7 degrees to the left, turn on the blinker, de-accelerate, like all sorts of kind of actions, which is very deterministic. That engine we ended up being acquired for, not our predictions in the language space, even though I spent probably 85% of my capital on making those predictions. So that is still in existence. Some Israeli company acquired it, and they do events and say Amazon Career Day, 500,000 people. You need to kind of schedule, meetings for all of them, and you need an engine to run that. And we see that the public-facing domain and what have you ended up being acquired by Elon Musk. Separate story. We can bitch about that another day.
X.ai. Well, all right. Let's talk about the latest and greatest. Tell us about Launch Brightly. What problem I'm trying to learn from you, Dennis. What problem are you solving here? And I already know about it and I agree, but tell us about the problem.
So we auto-generate feature screenshots of your application and inject them into your documentation. So they're always fresh and up to date. Pause. Let me rewind a little bit. Now, if you make any piece of software, or any piece of software which you see today and put that to market, doesn't matter whether it's B2B, B2C, and any flavor in between, you somehow need to support it. There is no utopia where your software is so intuitive and so good that any user who will touch it will never have any questions. It'll be wonderful if that was true, but it is not. The way you then choose to support any piece of software is that you put a knowledge base in place, and you can go to help.companyname.com on most domains and see, okay, so this is how I set up a new user. This is how I sort the table. This is how I add two-factor authentication. This is how I do n number of many things. In all of those articles that you put in place, and we all read one, if not this week, then last week, or certainly searched for one, and if not searched for one and consumed it, then there was some sort of ChatGPT agent who consumed it on your behalf and then read it back to you. But you need to put that in place. Each one of those articles will be chock full of product screenshots of your actual app, as in what does it look like. Now, taking those screenshots today is done manually. Like some individual called Tina will log into a demo account, go to the particular feature in question, click Command-Shift-4 on their MacBook, take a screenshot, move it into Figma or Canva, do some few annotations so you can kind of see what you're supposed to click, log into their Zendesk or Intercom or what have you, update the article with the updated imagery. This is not hard. It is just that, yeah, but you have 500 articles, 3 images in each. That's 1,500 images. And you can't update all of them. But what happens is that engineering today is moving forward with high velocity. We can push things to production pretty much on a daily basis. So the application, which is great, is moving forward all the time. Your documentation is kind of standing still and stale, and you have a process where you might audit it once a quarter, once every half year, but that's not going to work, not in this day and age. So we created this machinery where we'll log into your app, take those 1,500 screenshots, log into your Zendesk, extract all the images, do a comparison, tell you that, 137 are out of date. You want them updated? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, we do. We'll write them back to the articles. You are now in line with the actual application. So there's no disconnect between what you read and what you see. And that is a kind of interesting market because there's no other software. There's just a ton of people doing this chore. And we're trying to kind of teach these people and then persuade them to surrender to the idea that you should not be doing this manually. You should have a machine do it on your behalf. So that's us.
It's a real problem too. Like as a consumer, of course, we've all been caught in a knowledge base of some kind where that screenshot looks nothing like the software I'm looking at right now. How do you, just going back to the investor and the TAM, the TAM mentioned, how do you, if you were raising money for this venture, and I don't know if you have raised money or not, but how do you evaluate TAM when there's like nothing exists? There's no subscription model. There's no benchmark really to point to. I'm assuming in this case, how do you size up the opportunity there? Because it is a real problem. There's no question about that.
So it's raising capital is never easy. As in asking other people to depart with their money is a difficult job. Now, raising seed capital, which we did for this venture, is doable if you can at least paint a picture of a future that we can all live in. There might be 1,000 reasons for why we might not make it to that future, but there's certainly a version where if you do make it into that future, you'll be able to create a really valuable company here, Dennis. I am willing to make a bet on you kind of give it your best run. And if you die, hats off for you trying. That's the whole VC model. If you make it, well, good on me for having given you a few monies here. And this is certainly one for where, as soon as I say this, people immediately agree that there's no near-term future for where the knowledge base disappears. Okay? That means every single knowledge base. Oh, shit. That seems like near infinite or true for almost all of the existing pieces of software that are in place, will have this problem. Well, that means you can speak to anybody from the startup down the street to Oracle and everybody in between. Not even like, oh yeah, you're for this particular vertical or for this particular industry or this particular size or this particular something. Nah, conceptually, any piece of software that is now in production will need somebody like us. Yeah, we might not make it. We might not be good enough. Somebody across the street will make this, tomorrow better, faster, cheaper. Hey, that's just our inability to execute. But the idea itself has this kind of idea of a staggering TAM if it turns out to be true that they're all willing to surrender to machinery. That, of course, is something which we need to prove. So that makes it easier. Just like if we go back to my prior example, if it was true, which we thought to be the case, that any website in the future, however small, however large, will have some form of analytics in place, that there will be no future where somebody is blind to what is going on their web property. That turned out to be true, and it's now a staggering industry. Hell, what? Adobe acquired Omnisure for $2 billion. So real companies of real size and magnitude got created in that space.
Have you iterated at all since you started? I know the company is young, but at the very beginning, saying this is the problem. We went through Gladiator, and we've all decided that this is the biggest problem, or these are the biggest three problems. Has that problem changed as you've gotten to talk to customers?
No, I'm not a big fan. That's a defect, I think. I'm not a big fan of the pivot. If you believe that there was a particular problem that was worth attacking, I don't think it's your job to make the company survive at all costs. I think it's your job to run this particular experiment. I think we can talk about startups as experiments to its end. If the end is you die, well, that's just the natural end of this particular experiment. It's not one for where we need at all costs to make sure that Dennis has a job come next week. That was not why we got started. We got started because we thought that the manual process in the current venture we're working on of creating screenshots for your documentation was a little bit silly, and that will eventually end up being machines. Let me create that machine. If that turns out to be a false idea and people will forever do this manually, fair enough. We'll just run it to its natural conclusion, but there will be no pivot. This is it.
I would say that's a very contrarian view. I even wrote about the Nokias of the world in the 1800s, right? Started out as paper mills, and the Airbnbs, as you mentioned, the Twitters, the X's, right? All had these major pivots that they, was a side project or it wasn't even on the radar. I like that view because, if you're talking about being married to the problem, that's full commitment. You're not married to the solution. You're also not married to the company, XYZ LLC. You're truly married to the problem.
Married to the problem. And if I want to get to the end, at least I can tell people this was not a problem. And I know for sure I exhausted all the attack angles with everything I certainly had. It might be a problem later in life or things change and it comes back. But now I know it was not, or I certainly wasn't good enough to solve it.
I have a forum type group, like it's not YPO, but it's kind of a similar type of group. And we were meeting recently, and one of the members of the group posed a question about, is it ever worth it to keep a B player on a team? And we all kind of weighed in, asked some questions. You'd mentioned that A+ people exist. So I want you to talk about that, but I also want your perspective on that. Is there ever room for a B player?
Side note, we shouldn't forget that these are other human beings, and it's very easy to get caught up in the kind of supposed vocab that you're to apply if you want to be a real a startup guy. A players hire A players. No, B players hire C players. C players hire idiots. And that's probably true. And you should try to kind of hire the best possible people. There is not really a set number of steps. I do think there is a job you would like done, and would like it done to the best of the ability of the individual which you hire. We all try to hire A plus players. Now, I do think there's plenty of room in the organization to have people who are not necessarily 10x players. But I do think there's some places for where if you do not have that, you might have dramatically decreased the probability of success. As in, it's kind of like there's no 9 women who can make a baby in a month. At some point, you need one woman who's willing to dedicate the kind of stress needed to make a baby in 9 months. And I do think there's some engineers or some scientists for where there's really only this one person or this small group of people who can make it happen. And it doesn't matter whether we hire another 80 supporting actors, we will not get to the other side. So I do believe that to be true. But then once you get past the breakthrough, I do think there's a supporting cast that'll do good work on processes that you already figured out. You're not here to reimagine the process. You're here to execute the process as we have determined it. We might come back and revisit and help you optimize it, but you do the job which we asked you to do. So that might sound like I am overbearing or willing to tolerate people who are not kind of delivering. Nah, it's not that. I'm just trying to be realistic that, hey, we can all sit in a class at NYU Stern, and there's only going to be some top 2 of that class. There might still be 10 really good people in that class, like stellar people. It just happens to be that 2 ended up on top, but that next 8 in that class, they're fucking awesome. Like, I might even hire all 8, but they were not the top 2 in the class. So I'm just trying not to get carried away with the kind of presumed vocab of startup life.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you on that. And I always go back to systems. For me, I was trained by a business coach years ago that systems fail, people don't. And while that may not be entirely true, when something's not working, I always go back, just religiously go back to the system. And if I can build an A+ system, then a lot of people can exist in an A+ system that are imperfect.
I think that is very close to the truth. And most often when people don't succeed, it is very easy to do the whole, hire fast and let people go equally fast and all of that. But Dennis, you had a shit sales process. Just accept it. Like, you screwed up. Those people weren't set up for success. They're never going to succeed. You might have had 2 who are so exceptional that against all odds, they succeeded. Don't take credit for that. They should get some credit for that. But it was your process that fucked the whole thing up.
Yeah.
So couldn't agree more.
Yeah. My old boss, who's now a billionaire, God bless him, told me when he made me a partner at the company, he said, "You are on the harsh edge of reality. When you win, it's your fault. And when you lose, it's your fault." And I think that's the common thread with successful entrepreneurs is they own everything. Like when there's an entrepreneur blaming people, I feel like that's, they may not be the right fit for entrepreneurship, or certainly they're not on the right path.
And we shouldn't forget, you're the one who hired these individuals to begin
That's
with.
right.
So what are you complaining about?
That's right. Yeah, that's so true. In Launch Brightly, do you run into the same trap that we talked about at the beginning? Like, does that come up over and over again and you have to consciously focus on the problem instead of getting infatuated with the solution? Have you overcome that? Like, any advice for people if you're on the other side of it?
I agree that it's not always black and white. So Dennis is the guy who takes screenshots of features. If I all of a sudden launch some booking service where you can rent a room in my apartment, I'm obviously so far away from what I worked on yesterday that it's just obvious that we shouldn't do that. But there's a lot of things on the edges for where you need to be very strong to say, it rhymes, I agree, but it's not what we're working on. And letting go of those items that rhyme for where, they will plug right into the existing infrastructure. They would even speak to some of the existing users, but you have to let go. And I keep repeating, at least internally, that mantra to the team of it's very hard, almost impossible to be world-class at one thing. It is very easy to be half-assed at 7 things. If we're going to die, I'd rather die at least on trying to be world-class on one thing. And it's certainly a whole lot easier once you conquered one thing, as in you just have something which is so thin, but so deep that people can't really ignore you as saying, well, I'm not sure that's a business. It's probably not even a product, but damn, they fucking nailed it. Like, they're really good. If you can somehow arrive at that place, there's all sorts of kind of good things that happen. There's very few good things that happen at the surface level where, yeah, they're good engineers. They do a lot of fun stuff. Nah, I'm not that guy. So just really try. And again, it's, if you think of it as, say, some sort of equilibrium for where do I get the biggest penalty? Am I somehow penalized for doing, one thing too many? Or am I somehow penalized for not taking up that one feature that I should have done? Well, on those two kind of, sides, it's probably much better to not do that one feature. Because if you really needed to do it, and you thought it was somehow in the gray area, and you didn't do it, people will come back and remind you that you're probably wrong. And the very people who remind you will be your users for where, now, they will argue on your behalf for why this is not a detour. This is the very thing. You're just not seeing it clearly. And you'll get convinced and you'll see, you're right. So there's very little penalty for saying no one too many times, in my view at least.
Is it a trap, or is it good strategy to allow your customers to dictate where you go next? Because they fall in love with you solving this big problem and they say, Dennis, well, could you also handle this over here? It'd be an easy bolt-on, and it's not that, it would solve my next biggest problem and then my next biggest, and then your customers are leading that product development. Is it a trap? Is it good? How do you navigate that? Because I can see you kind of going down the wrong path potentially.
I think there's 2 parts to that, in my worldview at least. So there's the island that you and me want to arrive at. And once Ben and Dennis close their eyes, we need to be able to kind of describe that island, the destination, that hope of one day having arrived, having rowed for years on end, and you and me can walk hand in hand around on the island, and there'll be no doubt or discussion or debate on what happens on this island. Now, getting there, that's the hard part. Of course, we're at the very beginning, at the shores of whatever, and we're, setting out to see if we can make it. On the way there, I'm not too worried about doing a few zigzags, simply because these are unknown waters, and I might just end up doing a wrong zig, and I'll do another zag, and I'll kind of get back. That is not the biggest of my worries, as long as I keep telling my customers, this is what the island looks like. When you team up with me, you're in this boat, and this is where we're going to end. If you think where we're going to end is not also part of where you would like to see us end, then we're not the right partner. Now, on the way there, yes, I actually think this will accelerate or increase velocity ever so slightly, and that's how we're going to get there. We're going to build on top of this. Might turn out to be, a small error adjustment. Yeah, that's a wart. We'll just remove it and kind of be on our way. Was it a little costly? Perhaps, perhaps not. It might just be one of the many, many, many experiments that we run, which we still don't really know how exactly to get there and how dangerous it is. So that part, don't worry me too much. However, we are very willing to say, that's an awesome idea. That's not for us, though. That's not what we do. But here's some good ideas for other folks who do something in this space. You should give them a ring, see if they can help you.
Takes a lot of discipline to answer that way.
Well, yes, it does. And I do think of all the kind of parameters you can apply, age is the one for where it becomes ever more easy to politely, kindly, enthusiastically say, no, that's not us. And what you find out, of course, once you've done it enough times, is that customers really respect the no, because they now feel that, okay, these guys are really trying to nail this particular problem. I wish they could help me, but I respect them saying no, because this part which we contracted with and are giving them a few monies for, they're just they're focused. That will never turn to shit. I actually think they'll survive. I'll do the 3-year kind of contract and not the kind of month to month, because I think they're going to make it.
Yeah, well, a crude example in one of my businesses with hair washing and services we provide at the Gents Place, we'll have these very wealthy, sophisticated, successful businessmen say, Ben, I really like the Gents Place, but I don't need my hair shampooed. I don't need it conditioned. I don't need a beverage at the bar. I know you do the fancy bar thing. I don't like to make appointments because I'm too busy. And if I could just come in and if you could make it, $30 instead of $60, then it'd be a perfect fit for me. And the answer is simply no, in a very tactful way, with the reason why, and just, it's not who we are. It's not why we exist. We exist to solve this particular problem. And even if there's 1 million of those people, then maybe I'd start a new business and shut this one down and say, like you said, this one's going to die because the market's changed or whatever. But it's not who we are. I could never in 1 million years would I allow for the Gents Place business to enter that quote market, even though it may be a bigger market.
Yeah, I agree. And then again, and it feels, we can go back to one of the doors you opened before. I also feel, and I don't know about you, I feel almost a little unfaithful to my team, for where I rallied this team, I assembled this team, I made a promise, hey, we're going to go to war together, and this is where we headed. Then halfway there, I changed my mind. Like,
so
for
true.
me, it seems like, what? Like, I've been sitting here 6 days a week trying to solve this particular thing, and now you want to go hack on some... That's not the mission. That's not why we're here. Like, I just can't even get myself to do it.
I love that. Mission infidelity.
Yeah.
That's so true. It feels gross.
Yeah.
That's not who we are. That's not what we do. But there's so much money. Yeah, but feels even grosser, right? Doing it for the money. Yeah. Oh, I love that. All right, I got gladiator and mission infidelity. I mean, Dennis, we don't need to work the rest of this week, man. We're solving real problems here and putting labels on it that people will remember. Lastly, I want to make sure that people get in touch with you. You got a big following on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's like the only place I actually spend any time on. But tell us how to find you, Launch Brightly, how to find you on LinkedIn, any contact info you want to provide.
So I am everywhere on the internets under @Dennis Mortensen. So you can just go find me wherever you live on the internet, and I'm sure I will be there. Now, on Launch Brightly, if you've put in place any piece of software and you are somehow supporting it, and you run that help center, and one day think, so what does Tim do? Go ask him. I will guarantee you that Tim is doing Command-Shift-4 on that MacBook, taking manual screenshots. Put Tim in contact with me. I'll give him a personalized demo from founder to Tim, so at least he knows what is available. I would love that. launchbrightly.com. That is where you at least can find our emails.
Awesome. Dennis, thank you so much. Very insightful, as I thought it would be. X.AI founder too. So you guys definitely look up Dennis's LinkedIn profile. His intro did not do himself justice, but I read what he wanted me to read. But you have a fascinating biography in entrepreneurship, including some exits, which is how we connected, was through Post-Exit Founder Group. So make sure to do some research on the internet, as Dennis says, and look up Launch Brightly. Dennis, thank you again, man. Great talking to you.
Time well spent. Cheers.